Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited about what we're digging into today. It's all about your brain. And here's the mind-blowing thing. It's changing constantly, like right now as you listen. And the best part, you actually have a say in how it changes. What we do every day really shapes our brain health, our memory, how we learn. So today we're going to unpack what really makes a difference. We've looked at scientific research, some fantastic TED Talks, advice from experts. We want to figure out what actually works for building a better brain and maybe, what's just hype. Get ready, because some of this is pretty surprising stuff about our most complex organs.
It really is fascinating. And, so much of what we thought we knew, maybe even just a decade ago, it's turned out to be, well, not the full picture.
Like what kind of things?
Well, we're really in a golden age for understanding the brain. We're constantly learning new things.
Okay, so let's tackle some of those old ideas then. Because I definitely remember hearing that your brain kind of sets after childhood, that it doesn't change much.
Well, yeah, that was a big one.
And the whole, you only use 10% of your brain myth. Is that still floating around?
It is, unfortunately. That one seems hard to shake.
And the idea that brain changes were always bad news, like losing cells as you get older or damage from a stroke, has our understanding shifted there?
Massively. Those ideas are largely debunked now. The current science shows us something much more dynamic.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, first off, everything we do changes our brain. Every behavior, every thought, every experience.
Everything, wow.
Yeah, it's constantly adapting, and it's definitely not limited by age. This happens throughout our entire lives.
That's not just for kids.
Not at all. And what's really incredible is that this ability to reorganize, this neuroplasticity, actually helps the brain recover after injury, like a stroke. The brain finds new pathways.
So neuroplasticity, that's the key term, the brain's ability to rewire itself.
Exactly. It's the brain forming new connections, strengthening existing ones, essentially reorganizing its structure and function based on experience.
How does that actually happen? Like, what's going on in there when we learn something new?
So there are sort of two main ways this happens. One is by altering excitability. Think of it like turning up the volume on certain brain regions, making them more responsive, easier to activate again.
Okay.
That often supports things like short-term memory or maybe getting temporarily better at a skill you just practiced.
Right, like remembering a phone number just long enough to dial it.
Precisely. The second way is more profound, altering the brain's structure. This means physical changes in the connections between neurons, the synapses.
Ah, so actual physical rewiring.
Yes, and this takes more time, more repetition, more effort. This is linked to long-term memory and making skills stick, really mastering something.
And these happen together.
Often, yes. It's usually a combination of chemical changes, those structural changes we mentioned, and functional shifts across different brain areas working together. It's a whole brain process, really.
Okay, so if our brains are so amazing and plastic, why isn't learning always easy? I mean, why do we struggle sometimes? And why do we forget things? Are there limits to this plasticity?
That's a really crucial point. Neuroplasticity is powerful, but it's not magic. The number one driver of positive neuroplastic change, it's your behavior. Meaning you have to do the work, you have to engage. And interestingly, research, including my own, shows that difficulty, that sense of struggle when you're learning something challenging, that's actually good.
Really? Feeling stuck is good.
In a way, yes. That struggle often signifies that you're pushing the boundaries, forcing your brain to adapt more deeply. It leads to more significant learning and more structural change. That feeling isn't a sign to stop, it's often the engine driving the change.
Huh. That reframes things a bit.
But, and this is important, neuroplasticity isn't always positive. It underlies forgetting too. Or think about addiction that involves powerful, but ultimately harmful, plastic changes in the brain. Same goes for chronic pain pathways.
Ah, okay. So it's a double-edged sword.
Exactly. The key takeaway is that everything you do and critically what you don't do is constantly sculpting your brain. It's happening all the time, for better or for worse.
That's kind of a heavy thought, isn't it? That we're constantly shaping this vital organ. Okay, so given that power, let's talk about what does work. What are the proven foundational things we can do for brain health? Let's start with exercise. I hear it called a superpower for the brain now.
It really earns that title. And what's cool is the benefits start immediately.
Immediately? How so?
Well, a single bout of physical activity boosts key neurotransmitters. Think dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline. Almost right away, you can experience improved mood, better focus, even faster reaction times.
Okay, that post-workout good feeling.
Exactly. And, the runner's high. People used to think it was endorphins.
Yeah.
Turns out endorphins don't really cross the blood-brain barrier effectively to change your mood. The feeling is more likely from endocannabinoids.
Endocannabinoids, like cannabis.
Sort of. They're like your body's own version, homemade cannabis, if you will. And they do cross into the brain, giving you that mood lift and reducing anxiety.
Homemade cannabis. Okay, I like the sound of that. But beyond that immediate boost, what about the long haul? Does regular exercise create lasting changes?
Absolutely. This is where it gets really powerful. Regular exercise fundamentally changes the brain's anatomy and physiology.
How?
It triggers the release of something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
BDNF. Okay.
Right? Think of it like Miracle-Gro for your brain cells. It promotes neurogenesis, the actual growth of new neurons.
Wow, new brain cells. I thought we couldn't make new ones after a certain age.
Another myth busted. Neurogenesis happens, particularly in the hippocampus.
And the hippocampus is important for?
Crucial for memory, learning, managing emotions, even things like psychological insight. Regular exercise leads to a bigger hippocampus.
Yeah.
And that's a very good thing. A smaller hippocampus is often seen in conditions like depression.
So exercise literally builds a bigger, better memory center.
You got it. And this protects against cognitive decline, conditions like depression, Alzheimer's, dementia. It helps you think clearly, learn effectively, solve problems, keep your emotions on an even keel. The long-term benefits are immense.
That's incredibly motivating. So practically speaking, what should people aim for? Do I need to run marathons?
Not at all. The guidelines are pretty achievable. Health organizations generally recommend at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week.
What counts as moderate?
Think brisk walking where you can talk, but maybe not sing comfortably. Dancing, gardening, even vigorous house cleaning can count.
Okay.
Or you could do 75 minutes of vigorous intensity activity. That's things like running, swimming laps, where you're breathing hard enough that conversation is difficult.
Right.
Plus, it's important to add muscle strengthening activities, weights, resistance bands, body weight exercises at least 2 days a week.
And for older folks?
Balance exercises become really important too to prevent falls. But honestly, the best news is that any activity is better than none. Even short walks, taking the stairs.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
That's good to hear. Every little bit helps. Okay, so exercise is huge. Let's pivot to fuel. What about nutrition? How does what we eat affect our brains?
It's absolutely fundamental. Your brain is incredibly energy hungry. Getting energy from food to your neurons efficiently is critical.
Makes sense. Are there specific nutrients we should focus on?
Definitely. Omega-3 fatty acids, especially DHA, are vital. They're part of the structure of your neuron membranes, affecting how excitable they are, how well they communicate at the synapse.
Where do we find those?
Fatty fish like salmon are great sources. Also flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts.
Okay, omega-3s. What else?
Flavonoids are another big category, found in things like cocoa, green tea, blueberries, even red wine and dark chocolate in moderation. They seem to enhance cognitive function.
Dark chocolate.
Good news there. Right. Curcumin, the compound in turmeric, shows promise for helping prevent cognitive decline.
Interesting. Turmeric lattes might be onto something.
Perhaps. Then you have a range of vitamins, B vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin E, and choline, which is abundant in egg yolks, all linked to positive effects on memory and cognition. Minerals like copper, iron, zinc, selenium are important too.
And things to avoid.
Diets high in saturated fats seem to promote cognitive decline, so limiting those is generally a good idea.
So it's about getting the good stuff in, limiting the bad.
Yes, but there's more to it. There's a powerful synergy between diet and exercise.
Synergy, how so?
Studies show they work together, like an additive effect. For instance, combining DHA supplements with exercise seems to boost synaptic plasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and learn more than either one alone. Same with a flavonoid-rich diet plus exercise.
So 1 + 1 = 3, in a way.
Kind of, yeah. They potentiate each other's benefits for brain health and learning.
Fascinating. Okay, so we've covered movement and fuel. What about actively using our brains? Does lifelong learning, just staying curious, actually protect our brains?
It really seems to. Higher levels of education and, importantly, continued engagement and learning throughout life are consistently linked to a lower risk of cognitive decline and dementia.
So it's not just about school when you're young.
Not at all. Taking a class, learning a new language online, picking up a complex new hobby. Anything that challenges your brain and forces it to build new connections seems to contribute to what we call cognitive reserve.
Cognitive reserve, like a buffer against decline.
Exactly. It helps your brain withstand challenges later in life.
That's great. So Beyond formal learning, are there more direct ways to kind of exercise the brain day to day? I've heard this term neurobics. What's that about?
Neurobics is a fun concept. It's basically about shaking up your routine and engaging your senses in novel ways to jolt your brain out of autopilot.
How would that work? Give me an example.
Okay, try this. Put a few different coins in your pocket without looking, just using touch. Try to identify each one. Feel the size, the edge, the images.
Oh, that sounds harder than it seems.
It is. We rely so much on vision. Or try navigating a familiar room in your house, with your eyes closed carefully, of course. Or brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand.
Ah, okay, I can see how that would feel weird.
Exactly. Or read a magazine about a topic you know nothing about. Take a different route, commute home. The goal is novelty and using multiple senses in unexpected ways.
I like that. It's about breaking habits. It makes me think, too, about challenging our thinking habits. Like, if you always watch news from one perspective, maybe deliberately seeking out and trying to understand an opposing viewpoint. Not to agree, but just to stretch those mental muscles.
That's a perfect example. It's about disrupting those comfortable mental routines, forcing your brain to engage differently, consider new perspectives. It simulates different pathways.
Cool. So besides neurobics, what other kinds of activities are good cognitive workouts?
Well, visualization is powerful.
Yeah.
Mentally rehearsing something, like walking through your grocery list and where things are in the store before you go, it helps with planning and memory. Puzzles are great. Crosswords, jigsaw puzzles, they engage multiple cognitive functions like vocabulary, reasoning, spatial awareness. Some research even suggests crosswords might be particularly helpful for mild cognitive impairment.
Better than screen games, maybe.
Potentially, yes. Also, learning complex new skills, things that really demand focus and learning over time, like quilting, learning a musical instrument, digital photography. Studies show these significantly boost memory in older adults.
So challenge is key.
Yes, and sustained challenge. Even something simple like actively trying to increase your vocabulary, looking up words you don't know when you read that can actually increase gray matter density.
Wow. And what about things like Tai Chi?
Tai Chi is interesting because it combines movement, breathing, and mindfulness. Research suggests it can improve brain connectivity, potentially enhancing cognition. And we can't forget the absolute basics. Getting enough quality sleep is non-negotiable for brain health.
Right. Sleep cleans house in the brain, doesn't it?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
It's crucial for memory consolidation and clearing out metabolic waste.
Okay. Lots of practical stuff there. But this brings us to the big one. Those commercial brain training games and apps. There are so many ads. Do they actually deliver on the promise of a sharper mind or preventing dementia?
Ah, yes, the big debate. It's a huge industry, and they definitely leverage the buzz around neuroplasticity. They claim to boost memory, attention, reasoning.
But do they work? What does the science say?
The broad scientific consensus is pretty skeptical. An open letter signed by over 70 leading neuroscientists and psychologists stated there's no compelling scientific evidence that these commercial games broadly reduce or reverse cognitive decline or significantly improve real-world function.
No compelling evidence, despite the marketing.
Right. What studies often show is near transfer, meaning you get better at playing the specific game, or maybe a very similar task.
So you get good at the game itself.
Exactly. But what's usually lacking is far transfer evidence that playing these games makes you broadly smarter, improves your memory in daily life, or helps you perform better at work or school.
Why the disconnect between the claims and the evidence?
Well, if you dig into the studies often cited by these companies, you sometimes find methodological issues. Things like maybe not having a good control group.
What do you mean?
Like comparing the brain trainers to a group that does nothing, that doesn't account for the placebo effect or just the motivation of doing something new. Better studies use active controls, like having another group learn a new skill or do something else engaging.
Okay.
Other issues could be small sample sizes, lack of blinding participants knowing they're getting the special training, or even cherry-picking positive results without reporting all the outcomes.
So it sounds like they mostly teach you to be good at the game, not necessarily smarter overall.
That seems to be the most consistent finding, which leads to the idea of opportunity cost.
Right. What else could you be doing with that time and money?
Exactly. That time spent on a game with unproven broad benefits could be spent on, say, going for a brisk walk, learning Spanish, taking up painting, or even just socializing, all things with much stronger evidence for boosting cognitive health.
So the takeaway is, be wary of the hype. Don't expect miracles from an app.
Pretty much. Be skeptical of slick marketing using neurobabble. Look for evidence from independent, well-designed studies, not just the company's own research, if it sounds too good to be true.
It probably is. Okay, that's really helpful clarity. Now, you mentioned executive functions earlier, developing skills like planning and focus. How does that relate to all this?
Executive functions are like the brain's air traffic control system. They manage everything else. Key components are working memory, inhibitory control, stopping yourself from doing something impulsive, and cognitive flexibility, or shifting your thinking.
And these develop over time?
Significantly, yes. From infancy right through adolescence and even into early adulthood. And the activities we do at different ages help build these skills.
Like what? How do we build them in kids?
Well, even simple things with infants like peekaboo or copying games build attention and early working memory. Bilingual exposure is also fantastic from the start.
And for toddlers?
Language development becomes huge. Simple rule-based games like freeze dance or taking turns running, storytelling. These all build self-control and planning.
Preschoolers?
Pretend play is massive for executive function. Planning scenarios, shifting roles, it's complex cognitive work. Also, storytelling, sorting games, rhythm activities.
And older kids, school age?
Card games requiring strategy and memory, like concentration or Crazy Eights. Organized sports demand attention and quick responses. Learning a musical instrument is phenomenal for executive function. Logic puzzles, brain teasers.
And teenagers?
More complex planning, like managing schoolwork and activities. Sports, debate, theater, strategy board games, even some computer games used mindfully can continue to hone these skills.
So it's about progressively more complex challenges that require that control tower to work harder.
Precisely. You're constantly scaffolding those abilities through engaging activities.
That ties nicely into something you mentioned as part of executive function, working memory. Can you elaborate on that? Why is it so important?
Working memory is absolutely fundamental. Think of it as your mental scratch pad, the information you can hold in mind and actively manipulate right now.
Okay.
It's what you use for planning your day, understanding a sentence with multiple clauses, doing mental math, reasoning through a problem. It involves keeping relevant information active and accessible.
So it's not just long-term storage.
No, it's very much about the active processing. It includes bits pulled from long-term memory that are relevant now, plus new incoming information, all held in this temporary, accessible state. A smaller part of that is what's right in your immediate focus of attention.
And this develops too.
Yes, capacity, speed, and the strategies we use like rehearsing information mentally improve throughout childhood and adolescence.
How does it relate to learning?
It's critical. Working memory acts like a gateway to long-term memory. Information has to be processed in working memory to be properly encoded for later recall. If your working memory is overloaded, learning becomes much harder.
Can you give an example?
Sure, think about understanding a complex science concept, or even a math problem like algebra. You need to hold multiple pieces of information, definitions, previous steps, the numbers involved in your mind simultaneously to see the relationships and solve it. You can't just memorize pieces in isolation.
Right, you have to juggle them mentally.
Exactly. That juggling capacity is working memory. It's strongly linked to what psychologists call fluid intelligence, your ability to reason and solve novel problems. And having good fluid intelligence, supported by working memory, helps you build crystallized intelligence, which is your base of accumulated knowledge.
So strengthening that mental workspace through active engagement helps us learn better and solve problems more effectively throughout life.
That's the idea. Active, focused engagement is key.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. Let's try to pull the main threads together. What's the core message here? It seems clear our brains are remarkably adaptable. That's neuroplasticity. And our everyday behaviors are constantly shaping them, for better or worse.
That's right. It's an ongoing process driven by what we do.
And while those flashy brain training games might not be the magic bullet they claim to be,
The evidence for broad benefits just isn't strong for most of them.
there are things with solid scientific backing that really work. Regular physical exercise stands out. It literally builds new brain cells and boosts mood and focus.
A true superpower, as you said, both immediate and long-term benefits.
And fueling our brains with the right nutrients. Omega-3s, flavonoids, vitamins, especially when combined with exercise, gives our neurons the building blocks they need.
Yes, that diet-exercise synergy is powerful for synaptic plasticity and cognition.
Plus, the importance of continuous learning. Staying curious, tackling new skills, challenging ourselves mentally throughout life, builds that cognitive reserve.
Absolutely. Formal education, hobbies, even just reading widely, it all contributes.
And engaging in novel, multisensory activities, those neurobics, or practicing things like visualization and tackling complex puzzles, helps keep our brains agile and builds those crucial executive functions.
It's about actively engaging different systems in challenging ways.
So it really comes down to lifestyle choices. Which brings us to a final thought. Dr. Laura Boyd, a neuroscientist we looked at, has this great line: "You can actively build the brain you want."
It's an empowering perspective, isn't it?
It really is. So maybe the question for everyone listening is, think about your day. How are you spending your time? Are you actively investing in your brain health? Maybe it's swapping some passive screen time for a walk outside, letting your mind wander and make new connections, or finally starting that hobby you've been curious about, something that uses your hands and mind together. Because every choice, every little action is quite literally sculpting the physical structure and function of your brain. So what kind of brain are you building today?